Hi guys, welcome back to some Total Warhammer 3. This is my first Total Warhammer 3 guide. I've played a number of these factions now, some quite in depth like the Khorne faction, the Demon factions and the Ogres. I've dabbled on Grand Cathay and Kislev, because I weren't overly bothered about these because they're kind of like reskinned humans from Empire. They've got their own little twist on it, but although it recommends certain factions to start with, as it says here, Demons of Chaos aren't bad. I'm going to go through them and kind of tell you guys where I think is the best idea for you to start. I'm not going into what to build in your armies, just the factions themselves at the moment. So Kislev, you've got two lords, you can unlock a third. The third one, if you want to unlock it, you've got to capture the three main cities, Kislev, I think it's Prague, Erengrad, and you've got to hold them for like, I think it's like 10 turns something daft. And then you do a battle, and you unlock the third legendary lord, if you want to go down that route. Kislev, a lot of their units are hybrid, so they can shoot while trying to fight in combat. But they're like a poor version of Wood Elves, because you've got to do like a lot of hit and run type stuff. You can't just hold your front line like a traditional shooting army, like Dwarves with Ironbreakers or High Elves with Silvering Guard or Phoenix Guard. You're shooting and running, shooting and running. They're really tedious to play. They require a lot of micro. And if you're a new player, it's the worst kind of faction to play, because you don't want something that micro intensive when you're starting the game. So they're really, really awkward to play. So I wouldn't ever recommend these as a starting faction to anyone. Even when Immortal Empires comes out, these aren't a viable starting faction. The only difference between these and Wood Elves is these can occupy settlements, where Wood Elves have basically got their trees, and then they make minor settlements which have really crap garrisons, at least at the moment anyway. But Wood Elves do what these can do, but better. And Wood Elves aren't a good starting faction either. So if I'm not going to recommend Wood Elves, I'm sure as fuck not going to recommend Kislev. They're just not a good place to start. Demons of Chaos, which is the Demon Prince, the custom lord, he's got his own weird mechanic where you can dedicate the provinces you take over to a certain god. You are better off putting your points into one god, with some exceptions. Like you do want Lightning Strike. There's certain other abilities you might want that are in another god's tree. But the bulk of it dedicated to one god is the idea. He is good. He's a good strong lord. A strong faction. The one I would avoid dedicating to is Nurgle, because Nurgle's got the weakest troops out of the Chaos Gods by far. So probably don't dedicate to Nurgle. Your two strongest ones is probably going to be Khorne and Slaanesh, and then probably Tzeentch. Tzeentch is pretty strong as well, but he's a bit finicky, so you've got to be a bit careful with some of his units. But definitely playable, and certainly an easier time than playing Nurgle. But he is good as a recommended first campaign choice. As we found out today though as well, if you do play a co-op campaign with any of your friends, if your friends can't make, say a friend can't make it online, and you're going to have the AI play their battle, don't let them play the Demon Prince. Because the Demon Prince can be named whatever you guys want, the AI doesn't understand that it's a playable faction. It doesn't build any buildings, doesn't destroy any buildings, doesn't recruit any units or armies, and where you left your army, it stands in exactly that location, in the same stance, and does nothing. We had an entire stream of it today, it did nothing, and the person whose faction was being controlled by the AI got destroyed because of it. So, if you're going to play a multiplayer campaign and this person can't make it playing these, my advice is don't play those in a multiplayer campaign. Play one of the other demon factions, where the AI will actually do something. Because this one doesn't work at the moment. They need to fix it. They need to patch it. Because it doesn't understand what the Demon Prince is. Because you can change the name, it doesn't recognise the faction for some reason. And they just stand there and they do nothing. Grand Cathay, I've got the yin and yang system. Theirs is a bit complex because you've got your buildings that tailor to yin and yang. How you recruit units in an army to yin and yang, you've got to keep it kind of balanced. And then also where you deploy units in a battle to yin and yang. One of them, the guy's more melee orientated, the girl's more ranged orientated. But the girl does start with the Kurgans north of the wall, and the Kurgans can't be destroyed. They just keep coming the entire campaign. So you're going to always need some armies on that northern wall. Because they're not going to let up, they're not going to stop coming. I wouldn't recommend these for a new player either. So both the good factions, in my opinion, are immediately out. I don't recommend them in this campaign. If you want to play good guys, either try ogres, because they're technically neutral. They can go good or evil. And they don't start at war with the chaos factions. Or wait until they bring out immortal empires, so you can play some other factions that are much easier to play. Like dwarves, like high elves, like lizardmen. They're much stronger starting factions for a new player than these are. These are more advanced, more finicky, more difficult to play. Ogres are very, very good. Very, very good. Scrag is more of a caster, but he does buff Gorges, and Gorges at the moment are one of the most broken units in the game. They're really cool. But Greases is also really fucking strong. And Ogres, if you use them right, can actually make a shit ton of money. They could be one of the richest factions in the game, even in Immortal Empires when it's launched. They do build these encampments. They're limited in number, kind of like Beastmen Herdstones. But you can build them wherever you want, rather than on the location of a town or city. While you're in this area, your army doesn't cost you meat, which is kind of like the Skaven equivalent of food. And you can pop one down and just basically stop your army from costing you meat in an area. You want to build one somewhere safe-ish initially, because that's where you're going to recruit all your best units from, because it's got 10 settlement slots. And then you can basically garrison a full army inside it at reduced upkeep, kind of like a Black Ark for the Dark Elves. So they have a few mixed elements into one to make the ogres work, but it does work. They are very cool. And being that unless you take Noblars, which are terrible, they're pretty much all monstrous units, and they work very, very well. And although you might think, well, what if the enemy's got a lot of anti-large units? They can, but you've got anti-large units as well as anti-infantry units as well in your army that also perform really well. And then things like Gorges are Stalk, Vanguard, Unbreakable, and have Frenzy. And while they've got Frenzy with Unbreakable, they can't lose their Frenzy, ever. Because they can't go below 50 leadership, because they don't break. So, Gorges are like... You can build an army of them and do amazingly well. And because they can Vanguard and Stalk, ranged armies are going to get their asses kicked in spectacular fucking fashion. And they can fight decent in combat as well. And if you're playing Scrag, he gives them a lot of buffs as well that Greasus doesn't give them. So he makes them even stronger and reduces their upkeep so you can have more of them. So they are a really good option for anyone if you want to play good or evil. So you can side with both. Khorne, I'm playing him from a single player campaign at the moment on YouTube. Really strong. It does seem you have to do probably more raising and sacking to get your money up, because you don't have a lot of money coming in, and Khorne units are really expensive. But it's a good strong faction, and it kind of teaches you a little bit how a horde army works, but while occupying settlements. What you want to do with him, though, ideally, is don't occupy any towns. Only occupy cities, raise all the towns, either for a blood host if you can afford it. If you can't, then raise it for skulls. Because the skulls also, you need to use the skulls to pay for your research. When you raise a town, there's a chance that the city will colonise it automatically for free. So it doesn't then cost you any skulls. You've just got to build it up with favour, as you would do normally. But Khorne's very, very strong. Slaanesh, also pretty cool. The Demonettes are really good. They're similar in the way to Bloodletters because they've got armor piercing, but they're a lot faster. The quickest army in the game, I think, probably at the moment. Maybe even in Immortal Empires as well. Especially considering some of the infantry run as fast almost as some cavalry. They are ridiculously quick. So, in terms of getting to an enemy army or getting to locations fast, they are fast. I had a battle where the enemy was reinforcing with a massive army, and I had less than 2 minutes to kill the army that was on the field. Now, the army on the field is much smaller than mine, but obviously I've got to kill them, break them to win the battle. So I charged up there because I have the speed of all the Slaanesh units. I was able to get there, kill them, break them, get them off the field, and then end the battle so that other army didn't reinforce. Because before I had access to Lightning Strike. Good units in those are like your Demonettes, your Exalted Demonettes, but then your Fiends of Slaanesh. You don't really need much else in your armies with those. You can take Soul Grinders in all 4 of these armies, as well as Spawns of Chaos. I don't recommend Spawn for Khorne because of Rampage. Nurgle, you might need them because Nurgle hasn't got many great units in his roster. Tzeentch, on the other hand, because he gives a shield to all his units, he can make Spawn very good. And then you've got access to Chaos Knights. I don't know why none of the others have got Chaos Knights in their army, just Tzeentch. And then you've got like a flying cavalry version of Chaos Knights, which are on like his discs of Tzeentch. They can be quite good. But your Spawn with a shield are quite nasty. They're quite a decent unit. So if you do want a melee Tzeentch army, which I'll be playing in one of my campaigns, you haven't got to take any pink horrors at all. You could probably take a Iridescent Horror for the training and some extra Winds of Magic for your Lord, because your magic's still really strong. But then you could take things like some Forsaken if you wanted. They're not bad with the shield, but then you Spawn really quite good. If you take any of the flying flamers as well in the chariots, they're good for sniping and killing enemy heroes and lords. So you can kill the enemy heroes and lords with those, and then target other single entity units. So anything like a Soul Grinder is mincemeat for the flying chariot guys. They do so much damage. They really are brutal. They're like a better version of a Luminarch. Nurgle's strength is in his campaign mechanic, which is poxes. You basically want to pox any enemies around you. It spreads your corruption in their zone. And you want to try and get your nasty diseases and poxes rolling. So it attritions their garrisons, attritions their armies. When their armies are weak, you have much easier time dealing with anything, even if they vastly outnumber you. Kugath can buff Nurglings to make them really, really strong. You can't really take a full army of them because they don't really kill much. But 3, maybe 4 units of Nurglings, even in the late game, they will hold against fucking anything. They are a bastard to shift if you've got Kugath leading the army. If it's your 2nd and 3rd army, you're probably better off sticking with things like Plague Bearers, Exalted Plague Bearers. And then for your kill options, again, you've got Soul Grinders, maybe your Spawn and Nurgle, and your Beast and Nurgle. They're more your killer units. And obviously you'd put some of those into Kugath's army as well. But 3 or 4 units of Nurglings are good at holding any front line. They are really, really durable under him. And Slaanesh, Tzeentch and Nurgle have all got some nasty spells. Incredibly nasty spells. So certain spells in there, if you can get your Winds of Magic high enough, a couple of casts of those, if the enemy's got like a lot of melee units or he's stacked up a lot of range units and you can get cast off on them, you'll be breaking their entire army. I went into the quest battle for Scarbrand. To be fair, I didn't take a big army. I only had like 14 units. And there was 2 Khorne armies of about 7, 8 units. But he's got all endgame units like Blood Crushers, Minotaurs, Soul Grinders and Extra Bloodthirster. He had all the good shit. But then a massive Nurgle army comes on behind you. So I killed both Khorne armies. My armour was shot to shit. They were all decimated. the Nurgle guy cost 2 spells, my entire army evaporated. So some of the spells can be quite potent, and that's where you get a lot of your kill potential. It's not so much in your units with Nurgle, it's in the magic and his diseases before they actually hit you. You give them a chance to tick away. One of the things people need to be aware of in this is if you get besieged by an enemy army, it's because of how they've changed the mechanic. The AI will now wait you out a lot of the time until you're really weak and then attack you and finish you off. Because you start taking attrition from turn 1. There's not a delay on it anymore. The garrison walls reduce the attrition you take, which, quite frankly, isn't good enough. I think CA need to revert it a little bit and have it like, say at base it's like 3 turns before you take attrition, maybe 4 on a city, and then you get +1 turn per wall upgrade. So you can get up to say 5 turns for a town, and then 6 turns or 7 turns for a city. And that's before you take attrition. So you'll still take attrition, just it will take 5 to 7 turns longer. Because taking the attrition straight away is forcing you to basically fight the battle with your garrison when it might not be in your favour. And at the end of the day, if you're in a town or a city, you're going to have supplies. You know, you're going to have a measure of supplies in there. Even like if you're playing humans, ones who could technically suffer attrition easier than most of the races, they'd bring any supplies quickly inside their fortress, town or city, and they'd be able to wait out for like so many weeks or months in reality. In this, obviously, you're talking turns. But you shouldn't be taking attrition straight away. If they're just encircling your province, your town, whatever, and they're not attacking you, you're not going to start losing people the next day if they're not attacking. So they need to re-look at that, because the AI's changed its mentality now, and they don't really build siege equipment anymore and try to attack you. They literally just stand there and wait, and they reduce your army's effectiveness to fight back. So then it's in your interest as a player to fight them much earlier on, but then if you attack them, you're sallying out. You're then not fighting a smaller settlement battle. So although they put smaller settlements into the game, the AI doesn't want to fight them. They've put the minor settlements back in, and some of them are really amazing and really good to defend. But they fucked it up by getting rid of the turn protection against attrition. So now the AI is like, oh, well, I'm damaging their army each turn. Why do I need to attack him? I'll just wait until he's lost 50% of his army strength, and then I'll attack him and kill him easily. So they've done one good thing by putting minor settlements in, and then fucked it up by making you take attrition straight away. So I'm glad you've put the minor settlements back in CA, but you need to take this out. You need to rework it, because that's making the minor settlements basically worthless. Because they don't attack your settlement unless they have overwhelming numbers. And even then, tonight I saw 2 armies waiting at a minor settlement, and they waited 3 turns to get 3 turns of attrition before they attacked. If I normally, on Warhammer 2, even in very hard difficulty, had 2 armies hit a town or a city, they would attack me almost straight away. Sometimes they may build siege equipment, so they build a couple of siege towers, maybe a battering ram, which might take them, 3 or 4 turns. But my garrison's taken no damage, so my garrison's at least at full strength, so I've maybe got a fighting chance. But they're waiting 3 or 4 turns, and I've taken 3 or 4 turns of damage, which is like 30-40% of my unit strength. You need to go partly back to the way you came from, where we don't take attrition for several turns, or at least like 3 or 4 turns, because it doesn't work the way you've done it now, because you're not getting to fight any defensive battles. It doesn't happen unless they woefully outnumber you and then you can't win it anyway. They're using what in some cases a player might do. rather than what you'd expect the AI to do, which is really weird. It's a really strange way of looking at it. But as to the factions, for new players, Demons of Chaos, definitely a good one. Khorne, definitely a good one. If I had to rate them in order, I'd probably go, because he's flexible, because from him you can choose Khorne units, Slaanesh units, Tzeentch units, and Nurgle units, but I said I won't go Nurgle as a priority, not for new players anyway. Put him as 1. Probably Slaanesh as 2, because you get to occupy more than raise and sack. Khorne as 3. Old Kingdoms as 4. Tzeentch as 5. Nurgle 6. And then it'd be 7 Grand Cathay, 8 Kislev. Kislev are the worst faction in a game for a new player to start as. So although this little Sigmar hammer here says recommended for first campaign, ignore that, it's complete crap. That's been done by a developer who doesn't really play the game. Or they've intended to play it in like easy difficulty. And never go beyond that. Because these will only get harder and harder to play. And considering they play like Wood Elves, and they're a very unplayed faction, it won't teach you how to play other factions in the game. Because they don't play the same way as any of them. Even Grand Cathay, for example, will play more like a traditional Empire and Dwarf army and High Elf army with rank and file. Some melee in front, some range behind. Kislev don't play like that. So they are not a viable faction to play, and in all honesty with how they play, I don't think many of you will enjoy playing them. Because they don't play in, well, at least in my opinion, obviously, they don't play a fun way to play. I don't like the whole hit and run, constantly run backwards while firing arrows, playing like a pussy. You know, I either want them to hit my front line, stand and hold, my archers start firing into their ranks, or I want to throw a melee army at them and go fucking toe to toe. I don't want to run like a goddamn sissy while firing arrows like, oh, we'll get you another day. It's like, come on, grow a set of fucking balls. You know? And it's just, no. Just no. So, do not play those as a new player for your first faction. If you really, really want to, because they're the ones you want to play for some reason, then at least put it in easy difficulty. Easy campaign, easy battle, make it easy for yourself. Do not try and play it in high difficulties if you are brand new to the game. Because all this is going to do is demotivate you. Because you're going to find them a nightmare to play. But the other ones, as I've listed them in the order, I think you'll enjoy playing them. Obviously, your Chaos armies are melee orientated, with the exception of Tzeentch. He can be ranged orientated, but you can also build him a melee army. Ogres can have some ranged units, but they are better melee orientated. Grand Cathay can do both a bit of melee and a bit of ranged. If you were going to play a faction for the first time, I'd say try Grand Cathay over Kislev if you want to go good guys. But the yin and yang system, you might find tricky to use. Obviously, if you've not played the game before, it won't matter to you because you won't have played like the normal Empire. But then when Immortal Empires comes out and you might play the Empire faction, you'll see how the Empire works without something like the yin and yang system. So you won't have to like completely balance your army and your buildings and where you deploy your units. So you can have a little bit of an easier time learning the game when Immortal Empires comes out. But personally, not the two best choices. I would put these, as I said, at 7 and 8. You're better off playing these other factions here. They will teach you more about how some of the factions play in Immortal Empires when they come out. They're stronger. You'll have an easier time playing the game. The only things you won't learn too much from the demon factions is about diplomacy and alliances and trade. You can with the Slaanesh to a degree, and you can with the Tzeentch to a degree. Khorne's got like practically nothing, but if you do go with ogres, they're very rich in diplomacy and trade, so you can learn a lot of that from them. So you don't have to wait for Immortal Empires to learn everything, but it will give you a better understanding of the game than factions that are really finicky and weird to play, and that Well, in the case of Grand Cathay, no the faction plays like, and Kislev, only one of the faction plays like, and they're also a pain in the arse to play, and very few people play them. I mean, if we actually have a look, if I try and bring this up for you, let's have a little look, because I bet it's not going to be fucking high. If it is, I'll be shocked. It's not on there. It's on here. Total Warhammer 2, 2,912 hours. Achievements, global achievements. Right. And this is going to be down, way down here, because I know how much of a ball like they are to play. Where are our good friends, the Wood Elves? Let's have a little look. So this is playing as Wood Elves on a single player campaign, and that's basically easy through to hard difficulty. 6.1% of the player base. So not even 10% of the player base completed a campaign with Wood Elves, even in easy difficulty. That's how unfun they generally are to play in terms of that. So with if you want to play in the high difficulties, when you get better, very hard, it's going to be even lower still, by probably a very large margin. Here we are. Playing as Wood Elves in a single player campaign on very hard legendary. 2%. So 98% of the player base never got this achievement. And that's very hard legendary. That's the two highest difficulties. Even I haven't got it. Do you know why? Because they're unfun to play. They're extremely difficult to play. They're annoying to play. They're not a fun army to use. They're extremely finicky, extremely difficult to use. And I don't see them getting any better in Immortal Empires unless they change how they can garrison and control minor settlements and how they can earn money. They need to massively rework the Wood Elves. But even then, their armies are still placed similar to that of Kislev. Just Kislev can colonise them with big garrisons, but their armies still play like shit. So they're not a great experience. And this here, showing that 6.1% in Warhammer 2, and that's, as I said, even as low as easy difficulty. That's almost 94% of the player base didn't complete a campaign with the Wood Elves, because they're annoying as hell to play. And Kislev play very similar to Wood Elves. The campaign maps will be different, but in the battles, they are very, very similar. Very similar. So, even though this says recommended, completely ignore it. Complete crap. They are not recommended to play at all. I wouldn't recommend either of these, as I said. But I hope you guys have taken something from this. As I said, I've played every single faction now. I've tried them all, dabbled in them. I've played these more in depth. Well, I've played these 4 more in depth: Demons of Chaos, Old Kingdoms, Khorne, Slaanesh. I've put more turns into Nurgle and Tzeentch than I have Cathay and Kislev. But I've been on Cathay and Kislev beyond the Rifts opening. So, beyond turn 30-40. So you've got an idea at that point of how they play. You've got to recruit some endgame units. You get an idea of how the armies work. And I don't like either of them personally. When Immortal Empires come out, I probably won't be playing either of them, in most honesty. If they give quite a decent win condition for Grand Cathay, I might play Cathay, but I will not play Kislev. because they play like Wood Elves, and I hate how Wood Elves play. It's such a boring fucking way to play. But that's me. You might be among that 6% of people that played Wood Elves in Warhammer 2. But if you're in the majority like me, the 94% that didn't, my advice, leave Kislev the fuck alone, don't touch them, because they're complete ass. Stick to one of the better factions. They're stronger, they're easier to use. Nurgle are a bit weak in terms of their units, so I wouldn't recommend those if you're going to go bad guys, and try one of the other gods first. If you're going to go on the evil side, I'd try him as a second, third or fourth campaign option, because he's a bit more tactical to use, because you've got to weaken your enemies in some cases first before you can attack them, because your units aren't great. He's got the weakest evil roster of troops compared to the others. But if you have any questions or any comments, leave them down below. If you enjoyed, give me a thumbs up. If you're new around here, please drop me a subscription. And if you want to get hold of me, all my links are in the description down below. And I will be streaming tomorrow night at 9 o'clock on Twitch as well. So I hope you guys enjoy. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I'll speak to you all soon.